Hey everybody, I wanted to record this video because I suspect there are a lot of you out there right now who suddenly really need to know how to edit video, and you've never ever touched a piece of video editing software. So today I'm going to be doing a crash course on the very basics of getting into video editing. I am going to show you how to move around in Premiere Pro, which is part of Adobe's Creative Cloud, and that is a paid piece of software. And then we will also look at DaVinci Resolve, which is actually a free video editor. And so I'm going to open Premiere Pro here, and I'm going to say New Project. And first things first, before I even push New Project, let's talk about file management and being organized. I'm going to be working in this folder on the desktop, and it's best that whenever you start a video editing project, you have all of your files where they're going to live, and they all need to be in the same folder. Because if you start moving files around or renaming folders or moving the project, you are very susceptible to running into problems where all of a sudden Premiere can't find the video file you're looking for because you've renamed a folder or it's on a different drive now. So it's good to keep everything together in one folder, and you also want to keep that folder organized. So if we look in my folder here, I've got a folder named Audio, a folder named Footage, and a folder named Renders. Audio is where all of my audio tracks are going to live. So right now it's just one music bed, but if this were a more complicated project, I might have two subfolders in there labeled music and sound effects so that I can keep them separate. Footage is where all of my actual video lives. And again, if it were a more complicated project, I might have multiple folders in there with different camera names if we had multiple cameras on one shoot, or multiple folders with event names if it's footage from a lot of different events. And then renders is where our exports are going to be, like our final product. So you want to have a nice, clean folder system so that you're not, digging around trying to find that one piece of footage and making sure that it's right, or you need to add something in and you're not sure where to drop it. Just make sure that you're organized from the get-go. So I'm going to open this new project in Premiere, and let's call it Editing Tutorial. And I'm going to put it in the folder where all my other stuff is on my desktop. And I personally never touch any of this stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and push OK. Premiere is now loaded up. And this is what Premiere will look like more or less whenever you load it up for the first time. And it's basically comprised of a ton of different toolboxes. So in the top left, we've got our source monitor or our preview monitor. In the middle, we've got our program monitor. This is where we'll see our final product as it's being created. In this right-hand side, we've got a lot of toolboxes stacked up: Essential Graphics, Essential Sound, Lumetri Color. Our timeline is where we will be doing our editing. We've got our toolbar here. We've got an audio meter here. And then we've got our project bin, which is where all of our media, all of our files will live. So I'm going to drag and drop both the audio and the footage folders and bring them and just drop them into the project window. And that's going to bring all my files in. So that's first. And then the second thing I'm going to do is make a new sequence. It's Command N or File, New Sequence. A sequence is where we are actually building our video. So I'll call it Main Promo, let's say. Now there are a lot of presets here in the left-hand side that you can use. I typically use 1080p RE 23.976. That number is a reference to the frame rate. And so this just depends on what camera you've shot it with. 23.976, aka 24 frames a second, is typically cinematic. It's what movies look like. 30 is kind of what a consumer grade camcorder might shoot. And then there are also cameras that will shoot 60 frames a second or on up into 120 and 240. But for today, I'm just going to be working with some 24 frame footage. We're going to say OK. And now we have our timeline down here, and this is where we're going to be dragging clips to. So I want to open my footage folder, and we see all these video files here. And if I double click it, it pops up in the source window. And the nice thing about all these boxes is that we can resize them as we need to. So if we want to make this a little bit bigger for our preview, we can just drag boxes around so that it's nice and tall. And video is basically the same process over and over and over again. It's cutting out a clip, dropping it in the timeline, making sure it fits, and then do that over and over and over again. So whether you are making a highlight video, or if you are making video announcements or a video teaching or a promo for something, it is that same process over and over and over again. So this is a 17-second clip. I'm clicking this little blue playhead and scrubbing through. This is just kind of a panning shot here. And obviously I don't want to look at this for 17 seconds. Maybe I only want to look at it for 3. So what I need to do is set an in point where I want it to start and an out point where I want it to end. So I'm going to put it right about here maybe. I'm going to push I on my keyboard, and these keyboard shortcuts are, you can change them in each program. I'm just going to be talking about the ones that I use. I'm going to use I for in point, or you can use this button right here that says mark in. Then I'm going to let it play for a few seconds, and then I'm going to mark an out point. And so now we've got a 4-second clip that's a little bit longer than I wanted. So let's back it up. 2 seconds and 16 frames. It's about 2.5 seconds. Let's do it right at 3. There we go. And then we're just going to drag it down here into our timeline. I'm going to use Command plus when I'm clicked on the timeline to zoom in. There we go. Now, working efficiently in video is largely about using keyboard shortcuts, and while there are a ton of them you can learn, there are really only a handful that I rely on pretty much every single second that I'm editing video, and that is I and O for marking in and out points. J, K, and L are rewind, pause, and play. So J rewinds. If you are playing or rewinding and you push K, it pauses, and L plays forward. And in the case of Premiere, if you double tap L, it's fast forward, and you can tap it as much as you want to speed up the cursor. And that's about it, I think. J, K, and L, I and O for in and out points, and then Command minus and plus for zooming in and out in this timeline view. Now let's keep assembling our video here. So we've got this nice shot of our scene, and then maybe we want to go to this next bit of footage where we've got the band playing here. Let's set an in point, put an out point, and then we're going to drag it down. And then maybe we want some clips of this swing. So I'm going to get like an in point there and an out point here, right where they're at the top. Drag it down. And let's say I drag it down here and then I want to resize it. Like maybe I want to see them swinging back. I can always just grab the edge and drag it out longer. And now we see them swinging back. And the same process works in reverse. If we made it too long and we want to grab this back and move it backwards, we can do that as well. Something you're seeing happening there is called snapping, and that's where your whatever you're dragging will snap to where the cursor is. You can turn that on and off with the in key or this little magnet. But it's really, really helpful if you're trying to make precise edits, because with snapping off, you're just kind of freehanding and dropping it wherever you want it to be. Now, we've got these 3 clips here. Let's see if there's anything else we want to throw in. Oh, of course we want to use a clip of bubble soccer. Let's maybe find a nice clip of right about here. Let's start it here. There we go. We got a nice kick. And we'll drag that down. And this is video editing. It is this same process over and over and over again. Now, you may notice that we don't necessarily want all the audio that we just got there. So what I'm going to do is in these audio layers, I'm going to mute that audio track. So now we've got no sound coming out. And then I want to go up to my music bed, double click it, and it will show up. And this is just like cutting out a piece of video. We're going to set an in point wherever we want to. I actually don't want it right there. Let's wait for the drop right there. Set an in point, scrub through, set an out point, drag it down here. Didn't make it quite long enough, so I'm going to resize it to make sure it goes all the way to the end. And now we have effectively made a highlight video, a very short 10-second highlight video, but it is a highlight video. Now, we could effectively call this done. We could go up here and say File and Export Media, and that would be our video and we would be done. But there's a couple other things I want to show you here. Now, number one, we can resize these little individual tracks here if we want to. And I'm going to resize this music one and the place where my footage is stored. And I'm going to zoom in here because I don't like that the music is immediately loud and the video is immediately on. I want them both to fade in. So I'm going to use the pen tool right here, or I'm going to push P. I'm going to click and make a dot. That's called a keyframe. And then I'm going to make a second keyframe over here, and I want to drag this one down. And this is our video opacity, or brightness if you want to call it that. And so at 0% opacity, it is totally dark. So now if we push play, we've got a nice fade up, and I want to do the same thing with the audio. I typically like a slightly longer audio fade up. So maybe like this. And if you had a moment where maybe somebody was talking in here, you would make keyframes like that to mark your volume where it's supposed to stay, and then 2 keyframes in the middle. And then we would drag that line down in between. There we go. So now we've got the music kind of gets quiet for a second, and maybe that's where we would put an audio clip of saying, oh man, this is the best week of the summer or whatever. So we can hear this volume go down. And that's where they would talk, and then the music comes back up. And then we want our music and our video to fade out at the end, so same sort of thing. We're going to put a keyframe and a keyframe and drag it down, keyframe and keyframe and drag it down. So let's test that. It was a little bit fast, so let's maybe stretch out that audio fade. There we go. That feels a little bit better. Now, you have video layers here that you can use. You can stack video on top of video. For the sake of a highlight reel, that's not something I regularly do. You can also stack layers if you're doing effects like light leak overlays or film grain overlays or any of those stylistic things. But I'm not going to do that right now. But I will show you an example of what I would use these overlays for. So let's say this is a camp promo, but we want to hear the camp speaker talking about the camp in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all these, and I'm going to drag them up one layer, and then I'm going to grab my footage. Let's pretend my friend here is the camp director, and we want to hear him talking. So I'm going to just grab this clip, and we're going to say that this is him talking about how great the camp is. I need to also move my audio down one layer. I need to make this timeline a little bit bigger. There we go. Move my audio down so that I've got my man talking. Now, right now, he's all covered up by all our footage. And that's not what we want. We want to do some cutaways, or what's referred to as B-roll. So I'm going to resize a lot of these clips. I'm going to make this worship shot maybe just like 1 second. And then this swing shot, I'm going to trim that way down. And then the bubble soccer clip, we'll make that real small. Yeah, you know what? Let's just delete this one for now. So in this situation, maybe you want to see somebody talking about how great camp is, but we want to see what they're talking about as they're talking about it. So I'm going to redo all of my keyframes down here. I'm just going to delete these, and I'm just going to make the music quieter in general. And so now, and make sure we unmute his track and mute the stuff that we already had there. Now, if we push play, so he would be talking, and then it would be doing cutaways to what he's talking about. and then it would always cut back to him. Now, that it would be more for like a promotional thing if you are interviewing somebody and they're talking about what a great time they had. You know, we could see the person talking, and then it would cut to some fun element, and then back to them talking, and then show another fun element, and then back to them talking again. So now that we've got that, our video is done. I'm not really going to dig into effects or anything like that. There is a huge effects tab here, and there's a color tab that's really the primary effect that I use, is just if I have footage that it looks a little discolored, maybe it's a little too yellow because of the lighting, or maybe it was a little too dark, I'll use some of this color correction stuff to adjust. You know, I can drag exposure up and down or change the contrast, or if we wanted it to be black and white, we could turn the saturation all the way down. But that's just stuff that's icing on the cake. So let's talk about now, how do we export our final product? And I'm actually going to trim this back just a bit. Okay, that feels good. Now, I'm going to go to File, Export, Media, and we are going to put it in our renders folder with all of our other stuff. You can see here I already did a test one, so I'll call it edit tutorial _ Don't ever write final, because you never know when it's actually the final one. I prefer just doing V1, V2, V3. And then once you have enough versions that you are satisfied with it, that's the one that you can rename the file final. So this is our export window. If we, drag this little blue playhead here, we can scrub through and see what all we've done. Format, I typically stick with H.264. You don't really need any of this other stuff. H.264, at least not for the kinds of things I use video for. H.264 is really the most common format and the most common web format right now. And for presets, I typically just like to use, if I'm uploading it for streaming, the YouTube 1080p Full HD. There are presets for lots and lots of different places. We got Facebook, we got Vimeo, we got YouTube, we have Twitter. But I've found this YouTube Full HD thing serves me really well. There's lots of settings here you could tweak if you really wanted to, but the preset adjusts all those for you. And then I'm going to push export. And then we sit here and watch a progress bar. So exporting can take a really long time if you have a long video, or you're doing a lot of video overlays, or have effects or animations or anything like that. That's kind of a time to just go and grab a snack, maybe make yourself a sandwich, whatever the case is. This was obviously a very quick export because we've exported 10 seconds with no effects whatsoever on it. But, exports, I've had exports take over an hour before. It really just depends on the complication level of what you're doing. And so let's look at what we exported here. Edit tutorial V2. Simultaneous update is finished. Yeah, have the updates film each other. Yeah. All right, so you can see that's it. That's our video. I cut our closing fade out away, and I didn't mean to, so that would be an example of where I would watch my export and then be like, oh man, I forgot to do the fade out. And so I want to just go in here and fix that where I messed it up, because I shortened the clip so the fade out is, way out over here somewhere. Let's make sure that it actually fades out, maybe before I whip the camera around. Whoop. I'll start the camera whip there, so let's fade it out right here. And then let's move our music fade out as well. Just scoot it back a little bit. There we go. Now, a couple other things. Let's talk about the blade tool. So let's say you have a clip in here that is a little too long, or you want to chop it up and you want to use the same clip in multiple places. You can either set in and out points twice, or you can use this little blade tool or razor tool. And you just, choose the tool, and then wherever you're hovering, wherever that line is, you click it, and that will split the clip to where you can separate that clip from itself. So if you want to use, an interview of this person and then an interview of another person, and then you wanted to cut back to this guy, you could do that. And let's talk about one other thing, and that is if you want to add titles to your video. Now, there is an old legacy title type tool in Premiere, but what's more common now is the Essential Graphics panel. And the nice thing about the Essential Graphics panel is that it has a lot of presets here. So we've got, angled image caption, angled credits if you were doing a movie, angled lower third. There's all sorts of presets here. And you can actually download other ones. This is a preset pack that I downloaded from videohive.net that just has a lot of nice logo animations and video overlays and all that stuff. But for what we're doing here, let's just do a basic title. I'm just going to click out here and drag it. I want it to be over top of everything. And we're going to size it down to where it's only like 3 seconds long. And we'll scoot our cutaway here up. And I want to make sure that I fade it in and out just like everything else. But again, that's a stylistic thing. Maybe you just like it cutting in and out. Be free. Do whatever you want to do. So now it fades out there. And now we want to actually edit it. So if we have this clicked, we have the Essential Graphics panel here. We're going to click where it says Your Title here, and that's going to pull up all of our settings. We can change fonts over here. So maybe we want something nice and thick like Bebas, and we want to make it a little bit bigger. And we want to use this tool to move it down. And maybe to the left. Here we go. And right now my text is centered, but we can, use these tools that you may recognize from Microsoft Word to do right aligned or left aligned. So let's do this. Let's finish typing that, and we'll call him Camp Counselor. Make sure it's up high enough. Maybe this one will do light. That doesn't quite stand up. Book. There we go. And I want to resize this so that I got a better view of what's going on. There we go. That feels better. Now, we can change the spacing between the lines if we want to, and the spacing between the letters if we want to. I actually like that right about there. Right about where it is. And then move it over. And depending on your footage, maybe white looks okay, or maybe you need to add a drop shadow. Whoops, I clicked off of it. If you do need to add a drop shadow, it is down here at the bottom. You're going to click this little box under Appearance that says Shadow, and then we've got some settings we can play with. This top one is Opacity. Then we've got Angle, and then the distance away from the text it is. And then this one I think is called Spread, and then this is Radius, maybe? I don't know. I don't know the proper names of the tools. I'm sure there's a much better, more well-trained and official video editor who can tell you. Typically, just play with these until it looks good, until it makes sure it's readable on top of your footage that you have. So there we go. That's decent. That's good enough for what we got going on here. And I'm going to say File Save, and then we're going to re-export this guy. We're going to call it Edit Tutorial V3. Same settings as before. Hit Export. It might take a little bit longer to render this time because now it is rendering that title out on top of our video. And while that renders, a couple tips here. Number one, save often. Video editors crash. They crash a lot. And there is nothing worse than losing a ton of work because you didn't save and the video editor crashes. And there's actually a preferences setting in Premiere where you can control how often your video will autosave. By default, I think it's 15 minutes. I personally like to turn that down to 10 because you can do a lot of work in 15 minutes. So save often. Number two, keep those files organized. Make sure they're all in the same place. Make sure you're not pulling things from like 3 separate drives and then plugging in maybe a USB flash drive and then pulling a file off of there. You want to make sure to copy all of your assets, all of your footage, all your music, all your photos, whatever you're using for this project. Copy them all into one folder so that they live together. And if you do need to move them to a different computer, they're all together and you're not trying to pull files from everywhere on your machine. And let's look at our third export here, or second in this video. There we go. That is video. That is video editing. You are now an official video editor. All video editing is that same process: setting an in point, setting an out point, dragging it into the timeline, and then repeating that over and over and over again, and then making sure your audio sounds good and making sure all your timing feels good and the flow of it feels good. But that's it. That's the technical side of how to edit video. And yes, there's a lot of things that I did not hit on, but we could be here for hours and hours. This is really just meant to be a very, very simplistic overview of the video editing process, because I know that it is a daunting thing to jump into. So I just want you to not be scared of this kind of software. Let's dig into DaVinci real quick. I'm not going to do as extensive of an overview because I've never actually used DaVinci, but I want you to see what the free version of a video editor looks like. So let's pull up DaVinci Resolve here. Now, this is the opening window for DaVinci Resolve. We're going to say new project, and we're going to call it same thing, label it DaVinci. Now, unlike Premiere, DaVinci Resolve saves its project files, I think, with the actual application folder. I'm not 100% certain, but you'll notice that once we create this project, this looks pretty similar. We have a pretty good idea of where we're going here. So the first thing I want to do, same as before, I want to drag my media in, audio and footage. Okay, here we go. Clips have different frame rates than the current project settings. Would you like to change them? I'm going to change them because I don't know what the default is for DaVinci, but once you have started editing, unless you're changing cameras regularly, this should be a setting you really only need to change once. So I've got my video clips here, and then I've got my audio track here. So let's see, let's pull up this, double click this worship clip. Setting an in point, setting an out point, and then is it just as easy as dragging down here? There you go. Now we have 2 timelines going on here. It looks like one is just a magnified view of the other. Let's use this GoPro footage here. Yeah, I've got some guitar player pedal board going on. We'll drag that down. Looks like we can maybe, yep, just relayer. Now we've got layers in video like we did before. Snap it in place. And so you can see that this is a very, very similar process. Let's see what audio looks like just for fun. Set an in point. Set an out point, and then we're going to drag that down. There we go. So you can see here, you know, again, this is just, looks like this is just a magnified version of the timeline. And that's helpful if you have a huge, like a 30-minute project that you're working on. It can be a giant pain. I am sure there are lots and lots of tabs and effects in DaVinci down here that I have never messed with, but it looks like color editor, audio editor, let's see, edit. Oh, okay, that's just a different layout. Great. So this looks a little bit more similar to our Premiere layout. This first one was for cutting all your clips out. That makes sense. This is where it's a little bit easier to drag stuff around. But again, you can still, you know, let's pull our wide shot up here. We can pull our panning shot of the camp, drag down. I'm guessing these icons, or this will pull down just video with no audio, and this one will pull just audio with no video. Yep, or you just click in the window and it'll drag down both. So same sort of thing, and then just for fun, let's delete these two. Let's make sure exporting looks the same here in DaVinci. File, export project. Yes, we do want to save before exporting, just in case you crash. All right. I'm going to save this in our editing tutorial folder in renders v1. Oh, that is the DaVinci project file. Okay. Well, here, we're going to learn this together. Let's find out where we export our project at. Like export an actual video. Here we go. Render settings. We're going to call this editing tutorial DaVinci V1. And looks like we've got presets just like in Premiere here, YouTube 1080p. We're going to add that to our render queue. Your render queue, Premiere also has one of these. This would be if you were working on a project. Let's say you have an event coming up and you're actually cutting 3 promos instead of just 1. If you wanted to edit all of those at the same time and then add them to the render queue, that way, once you're done editing, you can push render and it will render out all 3. So here we go. Editing tutorial, renders, DaVinci V1.mov, start render. And it will play it, it looks like, as fast as it is rendering it. Looks like it's done. Took 14 seconds there. And let's... Now you can hear there maybe that I forgot to mute the audio on the actual footage that I used there, but all that to say, most of these softwares are the same, and DaVinci is a free video editing software. So this has been a very, very simplistic overview of what video editing is like and how it works. Hopefully you feel a little more equipped to dive in our current situation. There are a lot of people who suddenly need to understand how to edit video and be able to get content online. So I hope this was helpful for you. If I left something out, feel free to ask a question in the comments. I will try to respond as soon as I can. Or if there is something that you would like me to dive a little bit deeper into, I can make another video as well. Thanks for watching. Hope this is helpful for you.